right, today I'm with MarkHoughton from Great Britain. Mark and I met back in 2009 where we were both competing in a natural bodybuilding competition in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Right from the bat, I realized Mark was a very smart guy, knew what he was doing, hit it off. We have common interests in music, obviously fitness and these things. And as I start these podcasts or interviews, I thought Mark would be great. I know since then he was having success in the past, and since then had even more success in his bodybuilding career. And I'll let him tell us about that. So Mark, just to start off, maybe a little bit of background, who you are, what you do, and maybe your journey into fitness and exercise.
Yeah, sure. I'll try and make it as brief as I can. I began training in 1982. I was the typical skinny kid, got a bit pushed around at school, nothing terrible, but because of my size, and I was quite timid at that time. And the funny thing was, before I even lifted a weight, my dad had a market stall selling fruit, and I ended up helping him out, carrying boxes of stuff and fruit and bananas, all sorts. And I just noticed me body changing slightly, not a lot, but when you're that young, little changes. I was quite lean. I noticed my biceps started to get a bit more, slightly raw rounder, probably from a 10-inch to 10.1-inch arm. But at that stage, it was noticeable. And so I actually enjoyed the lifting. I would go and, instead of carrying one box, I'd start carrying two, progressive overload at that time without even realizing it, 3-4 boxes. And I'd actually got a little bit of development. For me, it was noticeable. For other people, probably didn't notice a thing. And I got talking to one of the guys in the market who lifted weights. Never saw him with his t-shirt on. He was always wearing a jumper, but he had a big chest and everything. I later saw him with a t-shirt on, and he was carrying quite a bit of weight, so he wasn't actually muscular, but he was a big Arnold Schwarzenegger fan and talked about the gym. And eventually that year, I took I went for it and joined a local gym. And at that stage, first few weeks, gained quite quick for the first few weeks. And then I started looking into this other local gym, more of a hardcore gym. My first gym was pretty much mixed in with boxing and weights. And so I went to this other gym. And as soon as I walked in there, it was the typical spit and sawdust, old school, real dark and dingy. But the atmosphere was it grabbed me straight away. And so I went there, had a session, and decided to join. This was for me how I'm going to progress to the next step. And so great. I started training there for a few weeks. I was in central London in a sports shop, and I bumped into ended up speaking to the manager. That's a story in itself, which I won't sort of sidetrack. And it turns out he was a big heavy duty fan of Mike Mentzer, and he virtually talked me into trying heavy duty. He virtually wouldn't let me leave the shop until I was convinced. So I started reading up on it. It turned out I had a few bodybuilding mags where Mentzer had some articles in, so I used them as me base and started training as best as I could, how I interpreted heavy duty. It wasn't perhaps as accurate as the process was supposed to be, but I had a rough idea and trained hard. And found out the following week that the gym was about to get 6 Nautilus machines from America were arriving. So having read about them from the Mike Mentzer article, I thought I'd struck gold. And so I carried on training, started using the Nautilus, found myself a guy my age who was a similar amount mindset, and he let me lead, which was good. So I sort of pushed him into the heavy duty style, which he enjoyed. He enjoyed working hard, which was good. And about a year down the line, we both got talked into entering a local competition by a guy called.
How old were you then?
I would have been, I can't remember, 16 or 17, and this was like under 21 contest, and it was people coming over from France, and we went into it. We were out of our depth, but Serge Nubret was there as he was guest of a guy called Wilf Sylvester, who's the guy that got us into going into it. Wilf Sylvester was a former Mr. Universe and who competed in the Mr. Olympia in the late 80s, early 90s. And he was just a local guy who trained at our local gym, and there was a lot of bodybuilders there, but he was such a good, strong personality. He was funny, he was very infectious. He's one of them guys who's just an out and out character, and he could sell fridges to Eskimos. He was that sort of guy. So we went into it, and I was, neither of us got anywhere in the contest, but it was an experience. 500 people in the audience, and me, the skinny guy from school, 18 months later, was on a bodybuilding stage, which was crazy. But the confidence it gave me to actually do that, and I was hooked then. And the following year, I planned to do a certain competition from a natural federation called the IBBU, and they had their own magazine. And 6 months from the planned contest I was entering, the magazine went defunct, and it got taken over by a mainstream bodybuilding company. So that magazine disappeared, and I had nowhere to go for the natural shows because I didn't have any info. And plus, I wanted to be in a magazine. When you want to at that age, you want to show off, and that'd be looking back. I want to see a photo of me in a magazine. That would be a sense of achievement. So I ended up doing a year later some drug shows, or what I call open shows, where drugs were taken. I was at the time, I just thought, I've got this heavy duty training system that gives me an advantage over other people, so let them take the drugs. But I soon found out within a couple of years that doesn't matter how you train, if you've got that chemical assistance, especially at that young age, and competing against shorter guys with good genetics, that I had no chance. I'd get to a certain level, and then I'd just be out. The guys would be bigger than me, and at that time, I thought I knew it all, and I knew very little. And that's what youth is for you. I'm very passionate about things, and I become very sort of dogmatic, thinking that the only way is the heavy duty way. And at the time, Nautilus and Mike Mensa were promoting this. Yeah, everyone else is idiots, and we're following the right path, which is, of course, nonsense. Which is a shame, because there's so much can be gained from both their approaches, but it's just this putting down everybody else. But I was of that mentality. I was one of the converted at the time. So after a couple of years of competing, I ended up winning a show, getting a second, a third. But as soon as I went up to a higher level, then I was hitting my head against a brick wall, and they were only going to go further and further away from me as they started taking more drugs over the years. And so I decided to sort of drift out of bodybuilding, and I sort of kept an eye on it, but other things took over. I got involved doing athletics, and even took a gym instructor's course in the 80s, and ended up working at a Nautilus gym in the 90s, and had a great time there, putting people through all sorts of crazy Nautilus routines that Dr. Darden was writing in the advanced bodybuilding book, etc., and trying things on myself. And I made actually quite a good growth spurt twice a week, doing about 8 exercises on the Nautilus machines. And I say I was trying all sorts of things out, all various types of negatives, static holds, and it was great having that. It's like being in a sweet factory when you're a kid, having all those machines around me. And I was putting people through and making them suffer. And I was being used. I was one of the few instructors that actually generally believed in the principles. You know how gyms operate. People go in there for a job, and they're told how to train people, rather than they go to the person because they believe in what that person is promoting. Right. I went there believing that in those principles. And so when when they had this one set principle, which a lot of people who've been stuck into this 3 sets of 10 would come to our gym, and they would say, I can do more than this. And so they would send for me to put them on the duo squat or whatever it was, and put them right, which I did on quite a few occasions. It's much to my pleasure, and it humbled them, and it was interesting just to see their reaction. So in the end, the gym in the late 90s, the gym got rid of the Nautilus equipment, and being such a convert and so dogmatic about Nautilus being the one and only way, I left the gym in disgust. Which, you know, it's only equipment is only a tool, as we both know. There are better machines and others, but an intelligent, more mature person at the time would have reasoned that I'll make this tool work for myself or my clients, rather than, oh, I've got an inferior tool, I'm going to leave. But I did, and again drifted off into other things. Started, you know, still training, doing Mensa's was back on the scene with his ultra abbreviated training, which I tried and did not get good results from. Gained a bit of weight, as he kept saying, increase the calories to facilitate this new muscle you're going to be putting on. And I got fatter, and I realized that my physique was actually looking worse, and got some sort of back to normal from training more regular, and become aware of the IRAT and Brian Johnston's work. And at that time, I was training once a week in this gym full of Med-X equipment, which again at the time I thought was going to push myself forward. And my weights went up dramatically. I was lifting some crazy leg weights, you know, one-legged on the Med-X leg press with like 750 pounds or something. It was, you know, because the stack was just nowhere near heavy enough for me. And I know for a lot of people they can stack out, but I was, you know, lifting ridiculous weights. But when I think about it, at the end of it, my legs were probably no bigger than they were at the start. So that was food. That's things like that is food for thought. And I started reading about the Johnson and the zone training, and I got into the zone training, and I noticed for the first time in years, my physique started to change for the better. No other real changes apart from just training in zones. But the people at the Med-X gym had these set principles, and they didn't like me training in zones. And fortunately, my membership was coming to an end, and I decided to leave and train elsewhere, because I understood why they had set principles. You know, that's their rules, fair enough. But I wasn't willing to, I'd got past the stage where I wanted to progress my training, and despite having great equipment, their rules were holding me back. So I ended up joining like a local bodybuilding gym. And at that time, with the changes in my physique and being involved back with other bodybuilders, I set myself the goal of being in better shape at 43 than I was at 23. That was my goal. And as that year went on, I started getting more involved in bodybuilding and noticed all these natural bodybuilding shows were happening in the UK. And in the back of my mind, I thought, I wonder if I could compete with them. I looked at the photos and I thought, I may have a chance here of doing okay with these guys. They're not massive, they're good physiques, but they're nothing like the guys I see, you know, I used to see competing on the pictures from the main muscle magazines, or I've seen live in the past. So I then set myself a goal of competing in a bodybuilding contest, and I did not tell anyone until a few weeks out. I started to diet, and then made the commitment, and found out that one of the federations, the BNBF, had their own posing clubs. And so I went there to help with me posing. Even though I've done it in the past, I wasn't particularly good at it, I would say. And there was a lot of help there in regards to posing, and I was getting a lot of positive feedback about my physique and that I could do well. And so I entered my first contest, qualified for the British finals, and actually got myself really lean, managed to win the over 40s class, and nearly actually won the overall. I just lost out to the lightweight winner. And I look back on that one now, if I knew what I knew now, I'm confident even with my physique then, I would have won it. But I was just so physically tired. I had been on stage for so many years. But it was just a great experience. I had a little binge out afterwards, which I regretted. It's a bit slow going back on the diet. And that later that year, did the British finals. And in trying to get myself lean, I actually over dieted. I placed third, But again, potentially that was a contest I now look back on. I could have won that contest, but which is a shame in one way. But had I won it, then would I have learned what I learned in the next few years competing? Because from then onwards, I did, many competitions, including a certain one where we met in Canada, which incidentally was my worst ever year competing. That year's the worst physique I think I presented, because I'd done 2 years competing, and the third year I was going to take off, and I made a mistake in competing and end up having my most busiest year when I was actually should have had a time off. But I visited Belgium for the European Championships that year, went to Canada for the IDFA show, and the New York for the IMBF WNBF World Championships. So met loads of people. So it was overall it was a positive experience, even though I did not do myself justice with my physique that particular year. And again, it's a learning experience.
How old were you in 08 or 09 when you and I met?
I would have been, I think, 44.
Okay.
And yeah, 44 I'd have been then. So, carrying on from there, my main goal was to try and become a British champion, because that was my initial goal. And 2012, with all what I'd learned, I'd finally got it together and won the BNBF British title over 40s, and then the Overall Masters, where the over 50s, the 60s and 70s all compete for the Natural Masters Pro Card. And realistically, it's between the 40 and 50-year-old, because the 50-year-old the previous year beat the 40-year-old to win the Masters Pro Card, and has done since. And 1 year, a 60-year-old has even done it. So it's not a foregone conclusion.
Right.
But that year I'd had someone helping me with my diet previously, but at the end of 2011, I'd learned enough from the help I'd been given to go by myself, and it paid dividends. I was trying out things, but by then I understood my body better, what was happening during the diet, and I actually ended up being bigger and leaner and fuller than I'd ever been before. And by then my posing was, as good as anyone in the class. I'd competed with another federation who had the Masters best posing, and every single show I won the best presentation. So the guy who helped me with my diet also helped me with my posing. He was an outstanding poser. So, my presentation was good, which in bodybuilding is important, because you can't show. It's important to show how your muscles to the fullest. And if you sort of hiding your muscles and not creating horrible shapes and angles, you're not going to look as good as someone who maybe not quite as good physique as you, but can actually show off that physique better. So coming into that contest, because I dieted right, I had a reasonable amount of size, but when I'm full, I look big. And when, like in 2009, everyone's complimenting my shape, not my size, because I didn't have my diet on track then. I wasn't lean enough or big and full enough. In 2012, I had that fullness and conditioning. So it was more of a complete package. I could, at elite level, I could certainly have been even leaner, but you're talking there pro level world, to win a pro world title, that's the sort of conditioning that's required, is 1 or 2 steps above what I was then. So I got my pro card. I then went to the inaugural DFAC World Finals, the Drug-Free Athletes Coalition in Miami, and did the Masters class in the pro division and placed 3rd. And that's a story in itself. I potentially may have pushed for 2nd, but there was a bit of a tanning disaster there, and I blame myself. The tanner who did it just had a tanning product that just was so poor and made me look like a ghost. Right. But I was experienced enough when I should have seeked out somebody else's help. I just thought maybe on stage it will show up better, and I put my trust in someone else, and I was old enough and experienced enough to not to have to do that. My previous shows, I'd trusted myself with doing my tanning, and whilst it wasn't fantastic, it was more than, it was competent. It's a decent enough tan to show off my physique, but I was so power in that contest. And the other thing was, I was actually a kilo heavier than I was at the British finals and leaner. And I learned because I was increasing my calories going into that contest. And so that would probably be my best physique I ever presented. But because my tan was so poor, and the photography wasn't as good as the one at the British, it doesn't really come across in the photos as well as the British finals did, my physique. And I was probably a little bit flatter as well, because I was eating so many, my food intake was going up. I was processing carbs at a crazy rate, and I could have eaten even more and I'd have been even better. But that's hindsight, isn't it? So that was ended up being my last competition to date, 2012. So I ended up on a pretty much a high, and then life took over. I planned to return to the stage, but ended up meeting my current partner, Sonia. A year later, we'd moved in together, and then a couple of years after that, I had the opportunity to take an early retirement from my job, because they were my job at the time. I was working for London Underground, selling in the ticket office, selling tickets and giving information out, and they were closing down all the ticket offices. And I'd done over 25 years with them. So I had the opportunity of getting a payoff. And because I'd reached over 50, there was an opportunity of taking an early pension. So what we did, then decided I'm going to leave. The pension would be enough for us to, at the worst case scenario, for us to survive if we could buy our own house. And with the money, Sonia already had her house. I had my money from my pensions and my redundancy money. And we ended up buying our own house. And as I said about the music, my interest in soul music, and for people who don't know, like Motown, and it's that type of music, but the more obscure type, the ones that didn't sell as well. It's a popular scene throughout the world. It's been going on for decades now, where people seek out these records that no one's ever heard of, and they feel the dance halls, and they're just as good as the stuff that got in the charts, in many cases better. But because there was such a deluge of records in the 60s and 70s, for every hit, there was about 1,000 records that weren't hits. So a lot of great records got missed at the time. And over the years, they've been, thrown away. And so there wasn't maybe not as many pressed as, because there were little local labels pressing them, they could only afford to press 500 instead of like the major labels were pressing thousands. And so supply and demand comes into it. And so the prices of these records is higher than the ones that get in the charts, because there's not as many records about.
Right.
And those people purchasing the record, still purchasing the vinyl, were the ones going to these gigs. So some of them records were fetching astronomical amounts. And in between that, you've got the cheap records and the expensive records. And I will just buy records, and if people want to, I trust my own judgment. I know the music, I understand it, and I'll just sell records to people. Sometimes it'll be records that people know and want, and they would buy it off me. And other times I might put up a clip of a record they don't know, and they'll hear it and they'll like it and they want to buy it. And so that was my little sideline, which I've done on sort of Facebook, a little group selling records, and that pays off. That money can go towards a house, initially paying off their first mortgage, and latterly, since we've moved house in the summer, where we haven't had a mortgage, it's gone towards the extension, our conservatory, and once that's all sorted, it will go towards something else. So it's a little sideline, a bit like yourself.
Yeah, it sounds like it's interesting. We have many parallels. And I found it interesting with Bryce Lee too. And how old are you now?
I'm 55.
Okay, so there's 8 years difference, but we started training around the same time, and quite a few parallels. I found that I was smiling throughout. Now, did you say you worked for London Underground?
Yeah, the Tube in London. Yeah. they call it.
And what is London Underground?
It's the train system throughout London.
Oh, okay, all right, all right. Yeah. I worked in the mines at one point, and I was underground, but even deeper.
Well, I think you were working a bit. I think you were working a bit harder than I was physically, anyway.
Well, that's the perception. There's a lot of heavy equipment these days that does most of the work. Now, one of the things over your career with bodybuilding, you were in gyms throughout. You were obviously exposed, and I'm sure offered many times to use drugs. And in telling your story, it seems like that was never even a consideration for you. Were you never tempted?
Never in the slightest. At the beginning, it was actually fear, because the scare stories going around at steroids, I did not understand them. And so at that time, I was actually scared of taking them. And even if looking back now, I don't think I would have, even if I understood like I do now, it's not guaranteed to destroy your life, but it's obviously, it's not the best path to take in regards to your health. But some people can take them and not have serious issues. But there is a element of Russian roulette you're playing with these substances. But let's be frank, people go out, drink ridiculous amounts of alcohol, eat all sorts of food, and so a lot of other people make choices that are not healthy and possibly quite just as dangerous to their health as taking steroids would be. But is this unpredictability of injecting something you don't know into your body, which I found was scary. If I was going out socializing when I was, there was a time when I was drinking quite a bit, but you knew pretty much what was going into your body. And if you get too intoxicated, if you had any common sense, you would be able to stop. And after a while, you'd put on weight and you feel dreadful, and you'd ease down on the going out drinking.
Right.
There are some people obviously have issues controlling that. A lot of that's to do with it could be to do with their upbringing, their personality. But I was okay in that respect. If I put my mind to stopping something and doing something, I could do it. So I think that's something, again, that's a genetic element there. My dad smoked for decades, and his granddaughter just said one day, "I don't like you smoking, Daddy." Oh, Granddad, I don't like you smoking. And he stopped and hasn't smoked since, after decades. And it's that mindset, and I think I've inherited that from him. And there's certain characteristics I can see now in regards that we're both very stubborn and dogmatic at times.
Right.
And when it comes to, if you ever saw us having a discussion about something, neither of us want to give an inch. It's quite amusing for when Sonia's seen us together talking about football, soccer, as Americans would call it, or even politics, and it's like neither of us is given an inch. So
it's very interesting. Well, in bodybuilding, I think tragically, and proper exercise in general has such a potential, to improve the quality of people's lives, in multiple ways. And I would almost say in some cases, for some people, it becomes though a bit of a body dysmorphia type of thing, where it's never enough. And then they start to resort to, at the mild end, spending ridiculous amounts of money on supplements, and or at the worst end. And I guess the thing with the drugs is, I imagine if they were taken, for some people, as you say, and they took them responsibly, if there's such a thing, but it tends to be that a little bit becomes more and more, and all of a sudden what started out as a pursuit of health winds up being very distorted. How common do you think that is? Has it gotten worse over the years, do you think, or has it always been pretty bad?
it is. I believe it's got a lot worse in recent years. I just think it's the way society has changed. Everyone wants something quick and something without having to put the hard work and effort in. It's just it's visible around me in society in general. And now with the popularity of people having that physically fit look, you see them with film stars and actors, and they want to look like that. And a lot of people, sorry, rephrase that, a lot of people like that look and want to look like that. And you give them the option of getting to that look in maybe a couple of years, or in a couple of months with taking drugs. A lot of people will just take the drug route, and drugs are not scary like we were when we were younger. It's with the internet and everything like that, you've got everyone telling you the negatives of them. You've got other people saying, look at me, I've taken them for years, I've never had any problems. You know, I'm sure a lot of them maybe have their own interest in trying to sell you the drugs, so you can't believe that. But there's so many conspiracy theories about everything going around that people are confused. But the whole mentality behind it is get to the destination quick as you can, and how you get there doesn't matter. Where I think each generation before us, there's been about earning. It's been about hard work and earning your place, and it's still, there's still exists. But I just think, it's just over the years, it's just got less and less and less, and too many people are getting rewarded for that, putting the work in there as well.
Yeah, so, I have a grandson who's 23, and occasionally he reaches out to me to ask me about programs and things like that, and I give him various advice and things like that, and generally just keeps right on doing what he's doing. And what I find tragic, I mean, I understand if a guy has an opportunity to have a multi-million-dollar sports contract or a movie role or things like that, I'm not sure it's the right decision, but at least it's understandable that a person would resort to that. But many times it's a high school kid who just wants to impress his buddies by having big arms. And I think, like, not just even the money alone that's involved, right? It's kind of tragic. And especially, I would think, if there's a time where it's more dangerous, it's during your adolescence when you're still developing.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's to do with the fact that the accessibility of drugs nowadays, and they're not taboo anymore. It's when I was younger, I didn't know anyone who was taking recreation drugs. Occasionally you go past someone, you smell marijuana or something right past the house, or in a pub or something like that. But now the youngsters go out, and you hear of, through friends and acquaintances, of all people taking all sorts of stuff before they go out. And it's said that the drugs are accessible, they're not taboo. Where our days it was alcohol and smoking, they were the two things. Now there's all sorts of drugs coming out, and the thing is, they don't know what they're getting. These people, the drug dealers, are so unscrupulous, they'll put anything in these substances.
So earlier, just to change, you said that was my last bodybuilding contest to date. I noticed you said to date.
Yeah.
So I have a double question here. One is there another contest in your future? And the second part of my question is, at your age now, do you see yourself potentially improving on your previous condition, or do you have to think to yourself, I have to settle for the best that I can be at my current age, which may not be what I once did?
Okay, the second part, the answer is simply, I do not know. But unless I try,
right, then
I will never find out. And that's my current training is directed towards that, in that I've had limited time to train with so much going on in the house. So I've sort of, at the moment, it's twice a week. I can probably push. Once things settle down, maybe I could, if necessary, if it's more beneficial, to go up to 3 times a week. But I've been trying to factor in, trying to push my physique to what I consider to be the same level as I was before, and maybe beyond, utilizing a twice a week system at my home gym, which is limited equipment with the various things to do with aging, sore joints, and recovery, and other other things in your life. And I've been just manipulating various training things to see what's working, what's not. And I'm inching in the right direction. It's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And I'm seeing my physique get closer and closer to how I want it. And then if and when my physique gets to a level I think is matching or comparable what I had before. And again, I don't know. The gym I was at had certain mirrors. We can look in mirrors, and you can see one thing in one mirror and something else in the other, especially years apart. I've got quite a good judge for where I am, but I'm not infallible in that respect. Sure. So I've been taking photos, etc., and trying to sort of monitor my progress and be critical about it. And so if I get to a stage where I think I'm in position now where I think I could be as good size and fullness wise as before, then if the fire in my belly's there and there's a path where I can spend 6 months of my life dieting whilst maintaining a certain amount of life balance in regards to that, because where before I was single, now I'm in relationships, I've got 2 lively dogs, and so I've got to consider that and how it's going to affect their lives. And sure, if I'm going to do it, I'd expect some support and understanding, but I've got to give something back there. It can't all be about me. So I've got to see, can I get into that condition where I'm going to be not only competitive, but potentially be better than I was before in regards leanness, etc. And so I've got to really, think deeply about that. And it's in the back of my mind all the time how I would do it. Even things like meal preparation, it takes time, and social events. I know we haven't had much in the last few years, and we're not massive socializers. We've got, family and friends we go out occasionally with, but it's still something that's you've got to consider. I'm not the only one in the equation now where I was before. Right. So that's something I was, but I love bodybuilding. I love the idea that the motivation you get from doing a contest, that yourself. Yeah. There's a certain fire in your belly when you train, when you've got a contest coming up, that unless you've done it, you don't know. And that's the sort of thing where when people talk about making progress is not this smooth line going upwards or whatever. It comes in spurts, and when you get at this big goal, and this is applicable not just for competitive bodybuilders, but for the general public, people that you train. If you get that goal that people are passionate about, you don't have to persuade them to come to the gym. They're getting to that gym. They want to get there. They want to make things happen. And that's what it's like when you prepare for a bodybuilding contest. And yeah.
I was just going to say, a lot of what you're saying reminds me of the psychological aspects of it. The motivation that comes with preparing for a contest, so you just train differently than if you're just doing it on a day-to-day. And one of the things that comes to mind is in one of Darden's books, I think it was the one that you can buy the ebook right now, Old School Bodybuilding for New Results. Yeah. And at the end, he makes a point, which I thought was really good. And I'm paraphrasing here. Arthur Jones saying not Arthur Jones saying, but him saying that the biggest contribution that Arthur Jones made was getting people to believe in the system and how important it was to believe in your system, whatever it was. And even says that Arthur Jones even considered that one set to failure may not be the best for everybody. But believing in it was really important part of getting results. And I've heard other people say that too. And when I read books, I don't know if you've read stuff recently by John Little, and the article I send you that basically says, that after a certain point, you're not going to gain anymore. And I think on a reverse thing, if you start to believe that, it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And
Yeah.
I've always tried to take the attitude that I'm going to go down kicking and fighting and scratching all the way type of thing. And maybe it's true, maybe, and I know that sooner or later, Father Time will have his way. I can't continue to progress till I'm 120. But to me, if you accept it, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Whereas if you maybe call it denial or whatever it is, but if you continue to look to improve, you're at least there's some, because I think the psychological aspect of it is very, very important over and above even what you're doing in the gym, perhaps.
Yeah, no, I agree totally. And it's not just about your progress, it's about the actual training. If you believe that you still can make these tiny little improvements, your workouts, you look forward to your workouts. You come up, Dr. Darden's come up with this 30-10-30 system. I think the negative emphasized training that he's come up with has some merits, but whether the current application or previous application of it is the ultimate application, I don't know. I'm sure over time it will change and may become even more, better than it actually is. And but in my mind, there's something in it. But even if there wasn't, it's that when you read about it, you think you're excited. You want to try this new training thing out, and that's what gets you down the gym. Yeah, but that's what gets you there. It adds to your life. You enjoy your energy about training, and then that all spins off into other things as well, where you're going through the same. People saying, you keep the same routine. Go to the gym, do your one set of 8 exercises, 10-10, and then come back the following week. And it's not supposed to be. It's not fun, but it keeps you functional. I don't think I'd ever. If that was training wise, I'm not sure whether I'd want to train. To me, training is about it's that challenge. When I was younger, I used to be able to do all these different sports, and now as you get older, you can't do a lot of the athletic events because your joints and muscles and everything can't handle it. But you can go to the gym, lift weights, make little progressions, maybe see a little change in your physique, and only you might notice it. But who cares? What matters to what other people think? That's the bonus. It's what you think. You're the one putting the work in. You're the one that should. If you see these little rewards and no one else does, it doesn't matter. But it's that the benefits from training, as people age, I think we're going to talk about anyway. But you're going to get those benefits, and you're going to enjoy your training. So you're doing something you actually love. But if you're just going through emotions once a week, doing something this is not recreation, exercise is work, that whole mentality is just so negative. It's a field of medical science type thing. You go in there and you do your 10-10, you're in that, you go through hell during that 10-10, it's painful, and you finish your workout, you forget about it and come back a week later. I love reading about exercise. I love talking about exercise. I don't want to forget about it. I don't want it taking over my life, but I want it to be a significant part of my life. And maybe it's something to do with some of the people who've run studios, done it for years, and there is a certain staleness there. Whilst they enjoy what they're doing, and they're, people, as I say, Skylar is obviously an outstanding coach in what he does. He's very highly respected, and he's someone whom if I read an article from him, if I see an article from him, I'll read it because I know he knows what he's talking about. But I think he's looking at it very much from his own perspective rather than looking at it from a broader perspective. And the individual, it changes from individual to individual. And he's never, as far as I know, he's never done a bodybuilding contest, for example. He doesn't understand that fire that goes through your belly. And I think in another podcast of his, he mentioned about people he's been seeing, how their physiques have not changed over the years. He's seen them, etc. And but he hasn't noticed their physique changing. But anyone can sort of look at someone in a t-shirt or whatever and not notice his physique. He mentioned Mike Lipowski, one of them, and said physique hasn't changed. But if you looked at his physique from 2005 to 2012, when he was competing and passionate about his training, his physique did change. He may have only gained a pound or something, but if you looked at his photos, his physique did change and looked significantly better. But that's me being a bodybuilder and a student of bodybuilding, can see those changes. Since in more recent years, his business has taken priority. And so the photos he's taking are probably going to be more or less the same as he was previously, because he hasn't had that fire in his belly to compete. Life's taken over. He's had children. So, you know, we can all pick a period in time where we haven't changed. You know, things like, you know, children, stress, all sorts of things take over your life where your training is going to be a plateau for a period. But when you get that free part of your life where you haven't, the stresses are reduced, you're sleeping well, and you're passionate about your training, you can make improvements, visual improvements. Well, I sent that photograph of you to show, you know, that when you're fixated on a goal, the weight might not change, but you can visually make a big difference to how you look.
Well, I think one of the things I really enjoyed about your last several sentences is hearing the passion in your voice as you're saying that. And I guess the thing is, in life in general, someone needs a passion, something they're passionate about, something they want to continue to improve it. In this case with Mike, maybe right now he's not that he's less passionate, it's just that his passion has switched over to his business, his family, things like that. But he continues, I would suggest, and I'm very impressed with a lot of what he's doing with his business, he continues to be passionate about improving, right?
Exactly.
In general, he's improving his life, he's improving his quality of life, and he's doing a lot of great things. And of course, the fitness is a part of it, right? Now, with some of the clients who have never been, you know, probably never even picked up a bodybuilding magazine, never been to a contest, might even look at us as a weird subculture of people that are doing some strange things, but they're very interested in not winding up in a senior's residence with a walker and having somebody help them with their day-to-day activities and whatnot. Have you worked with seniors and know of people well into their old age who are having great quality of life thanks to proper exercise?
Not so much worked with them. When I was working at the Nautilus gym, I had people of various ages. In general, it was sort of younger office people, but there was a few older people there. And I know of other bodybuilders and other people who do lift into, as they're getting into their 60s, 70s, etc. And without a doubt, their quality of life through training is dramatically higher than the average person because of that. And it's not just physical, it's mental. The stress release you get from exercise is massive. If you don't train for a while, and you notice the difference in yourself sometimes, in your moods, where that feeling once you've trained, that you almost like a deep relaxation, and most things seem a little less in things that you thought may be important going into that workout, so just a tiny bit less important the stresses. And obviously you've got the physical benefits. The thing about when people get older is a lot of people are not mobile, and they lose their muscle tissue, their heart becomes weaker because they're not exercising it. And the root of exercise is, without muscles you can't exercise, whether it's walking, swimming or anything like that. So having good functional strong muscles would allow you to do these other activities. which may or may not benefit your heart. You know, there's a lot of dispute about the benefits of what the benefits are weight training in regards to your health of your heart, for example. But even if the weight training does absolutely nothing for your heart, getting stronger muscles would allow you to do activities that may improve your heart health. So, you know, that strength training is the root of, you know, of health to me, because it allows you to do things that can make you healthy, even if it doesn't do everything in itself. And it can do much more than the average person realizes in regards to health. You know, you can get improvements in flexibility. You may not be able to get the extent, for example, a stretching routine would, to actually increase your flexibility. But is that flexibility going to improve your standard of life? Because you're putting yourself through a range of movement that's not necessary, for example.
Right.
And Nautilus always used the word enhanced flexibility rather than improved flexibility in their machines when they brought you through a range of movement. And I believe the reason for that was because you were putting your body through a range of movement with resistance, you were getting stronger in that stretch position, which would enhance your flexibility. Where if someone just done a stretching routine without getting stronger, as your muscle becomes stretched, it generally becomes weaker. So you're actually making yourself more vulnerable to injury if you're not actually getting stronger in that stretch position. And so if people want flexibility, then again, resistance training is important. A moderate amount of stretching at the end of the workout, I'm sure, is fine. You know, it may even enhance enhance things even more. But you've got the main thing. Strength training should be the primary way of increasing your flexibility.
Well, one of the, what you mentioned, the mental part of it, for me, without going off on too much of a tangent, but I'll just suffice it to say that this year I'll be 30 years clean and sober. So I'll just leave it at that. I made some poor choices earlier on. And strength training was the turning thing for me, because at one point I started to do that and I realized that, well, actually a friend of mine said, you're building a house in the daytime and you're tearing it down at night. And it sort of realized it wasn't, the two were not congruent, right? You were doing one thing for your health and other things that were destroying it. But I find that the progressive nature of strength training, in that you're always trying to improve, is a great microcosm for life in general. And it tends to create habits where then you'll sort of carry that into your career. You'll carry that into, if you learn a musical instrument, different things. It's just this sort of, I think Seneca said, as long as you live, keep learning how to live. And you're continually trying to be a better you, right? And I think exercise, just the nature of it is you're challenging yourself. Once you get to a certain level, you want to challenge yourself, again, more. Which, going back to what I said, settling to get to a point where you say, well, I've reached my potential or whatever it is, and it's all I can expect, is you simply won't push, or you won't try something new or whatever it is, because you just become, oh, that's all there is.
Yeah, your 2 points, the 2 points you've made are actually, one of them, I'm almost with a parallel here in regards to the alcohol, in that before I got back into bodybuilding, I was training once a week in the medics studio, but because I'm so competitive in nature, I love my sport, and I had nowhere to channel that competitive instinct. But I ended up taking up the game of darts. I don't know if you know the game of darts. It's in the UK. It's revolved around pubs and drinking, and I took it up. I was quite successful because of my competitive spirit and my mindset in that I'm going to be the best that I can at it. And so I'd buy sets of darts, I'd have a dartboard at home at work, and I'll be pounding away, practice. I ended up, playing 3 nights a week, going out on a Saturday. So 4 nights a week, I was out drinking, consuming alcohol. And it actually, after a certain amount, it does actually help your game because you relax. It's a game where tension can actually ruin it. So I was actually quite relaxed about once you had a few drinks, but then your body gets used to the alcohol and you have to drink more.
Right.
And so I was out drinking ridiculous amounts of alcohol 4 times a week. And then I got to the stage where my darts I sort of started losing interest in the darts because I become too intense about it. And it's one of them games where if you try too hard, you actually get worse at it.
Right.
Where in some other sports, you can actually, I'd put the same mental approach I had to other sports where I've been successful and it wasn't working. And then my physique was getting worse because I was gaining weight from, the drinking, and I was only training once a week on the Medex and my training plateaued. So I just thought to myself, I'm becoming a servant of two masters here and I've got to make a decision. And then after that thing, the more I thought, once I started the Brian Johnston zone training and made improvements, that pushed the balance back towards the weight training and away from the darts. But it's interesting to say about in your situation being making a decision. You put one aspect to you're putting all that hard work in the gym and then you're ruining it by going out drinking is exactly the same with me there. So that was one thing. And the thing where I was slightly different from you, and it's something which I regret, but it's part of me, is that you've got that positive attitude you've taken from training and pushed it towards other things like your career and other aspects. I've not tended to do that as much. I've probably become in the past too focused on the one thing, probably unhealthily so, but it has allowed me to become, without that, I don't think I would have achieved the bodybuilding success that I did.
Right.
So that's so it's the same when I've done other sports. I did athletics and I got to a reasonable standard, and with darts when I do something, it becomes almost an obsession, not as bad as some people I've seen. I won't take it to a stage where it ruins my health, but I probably put the balance too much on the side of the competition aspect of it. Because I love sports so much and I love competing, etc. That my balance, your life work balance has been probably better than mine over the years. But the only benefit is that I've maybe got a few more plastic trophies at the back than you have. That's
it's interesting you say that, but people who excel, especially at a world class, and being a British champion, that's world class, have to have a degree of imbalance in their lives. I don't believe you can reach those pinnacles without having a degree of imbalance in your life, at least temporarily, right? It's a matter of if you eventually dial it back. But I've got one thing I learned after, I don't know if you remember this, but when I competed, I'd had open heart surgery a couple of years before. So I learned some things. So I appreciate your statement about my work-life balance, but believe me, I got caught up in work and I did a lot of things. And one of the things I learned about passions is it's good to have at least two. And what I mean by that is what I learned is if when you're doing one, you can completely forget about the other and vice versa. Because otherwise, for me, it becomes obsessive, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things I learned about dealing with addictions and whatnot is you can't say, stop thinking about the color blue. Do you know what I mean? That's all you'll think. You have to come up with, I'm going to think of the color red. So, over the years, I've taken up the guitar. I've done various things. And when I'm doing those things, I'm leaving other things. For me, my obsession was work. And who knows whether it was genetics or overworking, but certainly I would do things like literally, there were times when I stayed at the office till the next morning. So I'm sure that was not healthy to do. And so I learned the hard way once I got a serious health scare, that it's important to have more than one passion for me, right? And that sort of keeps me. But at the same time, I recognize when I see a world champion, when I see somebody, I realize that I'm grateful for those people to have shown me what's possible, while at the same time being cognizant that in some cases they may have paid a price to get to where they are, that, you know, at least is a certain degree of imbalance. But I think it's the only way you're going to get to those levels.
Yeah, 100% agree. That's it. You know, that you're competing against, when you're going to any competition at the top level, you know, you're competing against some people who are totally obsessive. It's their entire life. They've got no balance whatsoever.
Right.
And it's, they will do what it takes to get there. And if you want to win, you've got to start stretching what you call your own balance to a certain extent, where it gets to a point where it can get to a point where obviously it's counterproductive. But there is you've got to, while you don't want to cross the line, you certainly need to push close to the line to maximize your own potential within that sport or endeavor.
Well, Tony Robbins, I don't know if you've ever listened to him. He had a thing about asking good questions. And, you know, if you ask the question, what do I need to do for my next bodybuilding competition and be better than I ever was? That's one question. Another question is, what do I need to do to achieve that while maintaining balance? Then it's a better question. Right. And yeah. I think you're already there, because previously, and it sounds, by the way, I wanted to say that it sounds like you guys have a healthy relationship with you and your partner, because I was impressed. You were very cognizant of the fact that, you know, if and when you compete again, that it's going to affect other people, and that you have to give back and make sure that, you know, if you're getting support from them, you have to give it back. So, you know, that question about how do I do it and have the balance. And I think if you ask the better question, the answers will come. And I think you can probably have both.
And the thing about it is, even if if I do decide to go back, try and pursue the stage again and go for success, even if I don't get there, then it's the journey and the attempt. It's that, and that's what it's all about in the end, because I could end up getting into the best shape of my life and hit that stage, and I might place lower than I've ever done before, because the people on that day will just turn out to be better. I can't control that. Yeah. Or as I've had before, it might be a very close contest, and again I could place low, and the judges might see something different entirely from what I see, and that's human nature. In close contests, subjectivity comes into it much more. You know, I know bodybuilding, people say, is subjective, which is to an extent, but there are criteria to follow, and otherwise, you know, me or you could go up the Olympia stage and potentially win it if it's subjective, couldn't we? I mean, we wouldn't, because there is an element of, there is a criteria to follow, and there's guidelines for the judges. So it's not quite as subjective as people make out, but there is a certain element of that. And so, and that's, but we go into that when we've been into a contest, we've done that knowing full well that we may get a decision we don't agree with. Right. And we may even get a situation where, in my case, where someone is entering a drug-free competition under a 5 or 7 year ruling, who we know for certain is certainly not 5 or 7 years drug-free. Right. And as I say, which happened in that contest we were in Canada. Yeah, I remember, because the one gentleman who won had been featured in one of Brian Johnson's books, who had said, Brian stated blatantly in the book that this guy was drug using, and the book was not 5 years old. No, it was 2 years old. Yeah. So, in parting, for what would be final thoughts
in terms of, let's say, for people 55 to 62 on exercise, life in general, what would be some closing thoughts that you think that would be useful for people trying to improve themselves in their lives?
You've got to make that first step. Talk is one thing. It's all about action. Go to a gym, go to a personal trainer. And it's important to start with, if you've never exercised before, is to, research into it a little bit and join a gym where you're going to get personal attention, and because it's an endeavor where if you do it incorrectly and badly, you can get injured. And as we both know, when we get older, injuries can take a lot longer to recover from than we were when we were younger. So that's the first thing. There's certainly, I would say, contact someone like yourself, and if they can't get in contact, if they can't use your service, for example, for you to get advice on trainers who you can tell them will give them safe, productive potential workouts, because there's lots of bad information out there. Mm-hmm. So as we're on your particular podcast, then I suggest if they can't work with you, to contact you and you can then give them potential people in their area they can actually work with. But they've got to take that first step. And nothing worthwhile is easy in life, and there's nothing more worthwhile than your health and quality of life. So, the first thing is make that step, make contact with someone like yourself, and after that, go get started. You've got to start from somewhere, and if you don't, your quality, as I said before, quality of life is everything, and strengthening your muscles will have effects far, far beyond just looking maybe a bit better in the mirror. And if you've never trained before, you'll be potentially, the results that you get could actually astonish you. You may be old, whatever age they are, we're getting older, but we're not sort of quite in the retirement home yet, not in the grave yet. We've still got time ahead of us, and just got to do anything in life. You've got to get off your backside and do it, because it ain't going to come to you. So that's the first step. Once you've got that step, you might find you love what they're doing. You might have a passion for doing it. But even if you don't, then it's still important to appreciate the importance of being fit and healthy. And that's the thing. I think people like yourself have got a great responsibility, Rich, in that those people come to see you. They might not like training. They may think it's painful. You've got to make it. You've got to almost find what makes them tick, what makes them want to come to the gym. You've got to make the experience for them sort of part of their week they enjoy coming from. They look forward to coming. They know training is hard work, but everyone who comes to you is an individual. And I think people like yourself can actually make that experience as pleasurable as it can, even though they're going to be doing a bit of hard work in the process.
Right.
And you can get them to rethink why they're going to the gym, make them set themselves goals. But as I say, a lot of it is that they've got to make the first step, and then after that it becomes a partnership, I think, between people like yourself and them. And so that would be my thing. Get off if you want something to happen, make it happen, and then it becomes a case of becoming a habit after a while and becoming part of your life. And if it does that, if it grabs you, then it's only good can come from it.
So, Mark, somebody wants to reach you to buy rare records. Do you do things internationally, or is that locally, or?
I'm on. Might do it on Facebook. It's international. I do, but it's very specialised, the sort of stuff I deal with.
Right.
I think the people that collect those sort of obscure soul records from the 60s and 70s would know each other on their little circuit. But if you know anybody that's got these obscure soul records, little local label records from the 60s and 70s, they're welcome to get in contact with me, and I'm always looking to buy records.
Is it okay for me when I publish this to publish your email address?
Yeah, no problem. I'm fine with that.
Your Facebook page, what is it called?
Well, I've got a bodybuilding page, which is I'm trying to remember it now. I've changed it. I think it's MarkHoughton, natural bodybuilding champion. But if they put my name, bodybuilding, and Facebook, I'm sure they'll come up easy enough. Or they can contact me on my Facebook page, send me a message. I can give them details. So I'm fine with any of those things. I'm always happy to talk to people and give my opinions and thoughts on anything to do with exercise and music. And I'm quite easy, I'm quite relaxed about things. I'm not sort of I do try to reply to people.
Cool.
And
I appreciate that. I have to run because I have a client coming in shortly, but I appreciate so much you taking the time. This was really fascinating, and I will probably put this on in the next 2-3 weeks. And then, of course, naturally, I will reach out to you with the finished product.
okay, great. Thanks for inviting me, Rich.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.